Hi, welcome to another episode of First Connect. This is a webcast of First Baptist Church that connects us from one Sunday to the next with people, ideas, different discussions that we'll have. And so it's also been heard that this is a pretty important hour for most people.
Oh, it's the best spent hour of people's week out there. The best spent 20 to 45 minutes, depending on what we were feeling like that particular day. I think most people spend.
Maybe more likely it's the most little-known hour of the day, of the week as well.
But it should be more known.
Yeah.
You should share this with your friends for sure.
For sure. We're glad that you're here. Hey, by the way, this episode is sponsored by Baptist Collegiate Ministries, okay? Baptist Collegiate Ministries. You see it right here?
BCM.
Yeah. And the Baptist Collegiate Ministry, it is it's organized by the Arkansas Baptist State Convention for the state of Arkansas. And within that organization, it is coordinated with one of the ministry teams there. The team is, what's the team name?
College and Young Leaders.
College and Young Leaders as well. And so we will have one of those state leaders in the interview you'll watch here in just a little bit. You probably know who this person is.
Oh, yeah.
We'll introduce him here in just a little bit as well. But Baptist Collegiate Ministry, BCM days, as you would have called them. I would have called them BSU days back in my college, Baptist Student Ministry. Back in my days.
Baptist Student Union, I figure.
Baptist Student Union,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. And so what did I say?
Student Ministries, which is what it became in some places.
BSM,
BSM, like
yes,
in Texas, I think.
Yeah, that is for sure. And all. So great day. So we've got an image here that we're going to throw up of you.
Yeah.
But more importantly, of Lynn Lloyd, who
Okay.
is our interview here in just a
Yeah,
little
that's
bit.
right.
Lynn Lloyd, a longtime Baptist collegiate minister here at the University of Arkansas, and I think real highly of Lynn. But this picture has kind of brought it down a level of what I think of him, because he's standing in the background,
Absolutely.
overseeing a sporting event with some Baptist collegiate students. One of those is David.
Yes.
And David, you were making an all-out in-the-air tackle of a young lady. Why were you tackling a young lady?
So,
and it looked like you missed that tackle.
Let me set this up just a little bit. I was in college here at the BCM. We were, I think, at a retreat this particular weekend.
Okay.
This would have been a fall retreat because this is a football game that was played annually at the time in the BCM, called the Flamingo Bowl.
Flamingo Bowl.
And the gist of the Flamingo Bowl is it is real manly. Is the guys would all have their ankles taped together, like my ankles all taped. So I'm just out there hopping around like this.
Okay.
And then Erica, my bride, is the the gal in that picture. Erica Jo Arnold.
Okay.
At the time,
Okay.
she was a vicious ball carrier. My wife was a basketball, softball player growing up, and just like a powerhouse basically. Yeah. And so I can with clean conscience tell you I totally missed that tackle in that particular
play out
image.
Then? Where did she end up after you missed the tackle?
Oh, she scored.
Oh, of course.
As
Not only
usual.
A miss, but six on the board for you.
Here's a little bit of trivia for you. So I wasn't a part of this interview, but do you know Lynn Lloyd's actual first name?
Lynn Lloyd's actual first name. That was not what came up in the interview, but Charles.
No, his name is Marion Lynn Lloyd.
There you go.
Named from what I gather off of an ancestor, Francis Marion the Swamp Fox. You may have heard of from history. So he's named after him.
Swamp Fox.
So like one of the was this Revolutionary War leaders? I feel like it was the Swamp Fox was going around there. So Marion Lynn Lloyd.
Did not know. A little trivia of him.
Absolutely excellent. College minister. I very much enjoyed my days in the BCM.
Yeah. So what was that like to be under Lynn's leadership at the BCM in those days?
Dude, it was a really, really good time. I met some really, really cool people in those days. I was just a few years ago, Erica and I were just chilling out one night and just reminiscing about days past and remembering different faces and different people. We're just listing person after person after person and couple after couple after couple of people we went through the BCM with at the same time. And the number of those that are in ministry positions these days, or like overseas on the mission field, or just all in committed with their faith and living it out like in the business world nationally or internationally as a way of going and doing ministry. It's just a really cool thing to kind of run through all the different ones. So, I was making a list over here even. got friends who have spent multiple years. Some are still over there now in the Philippines, some in Thailand, some in East Asia, some in North Africa, some in Western Europe out on the mission field.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm here now as a youth minister. I went through with Dane Savage, who's the the worship pastor at church in Utah that we're connected to.
Dan.
Another guy, Michael Grubbs, has been in nationally and internationally, like in ministry positions as well. The BCM director, both here and down at Fort Smith, are guys I went through the BCM with. So Cole Pinnick, that is the guy over the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville here, and then down at UFAS, Lee Woodmansey.
Oh, I didn't know you went to school with Lee.
I was.
Okay.
I think I
didn't know that.
I feel like we overlapped by a year or two before I got out of here. So just man, the collection of people.
Yeah.
At the time when I got to go through there, it was just such a treat. Lynn was such a humble leader and wise and gentle and creative himself. But what was really cool about the way he ran the BCM was that he really saw it as an avenue, as like a vehicle to empower students to go and to lead.
Yeah.
And so when you had some ideas for ministry,
Yeah.
like gears in Lynn's head would just start spinning on how can we assist this, how can we empower this, and how can we launch this. And that's some of the absolute best days of my life. Some of absolutely the sweetest nights of worship in my life back in college days, upstairs in the BCM, or I think for a year or two we were over in the Chapel of the Dove over at UBC.
Okay.
The BCM was large enough, 150 students coming to worship at least for stretches where we were spending time over there, and man, it was just good stuff. You spent time in BSU as well, though.
Yeah. So at Oklahoma State, Missy and I were both at Oklahoma State. That's where we met. So I met my bride through the BCM. I was just a year ahead of her. But I kind of joke about how I was her dad for a year. So they had kind of the same idea of BCM leaders putting people into leadership roles. I never dreamed that I might be a Bible study leader. That was a little elevated title compared to what I actually did, for sure, or what I was qualified to do. But it really launched me into probably what I do today as well. But it was great to be able to connect with a young lady named Missy Cullens as well, and hearing her angelic voice up there on the stage at the BCM and singing, and being a part of promotion teams that she did in those days as well. So great connections there, and it was a BSU director that did the very same thing that you're talking about. Steve Masters is his name. He's a BSU director now at LSU, and he, boo, boo, boo. But he was an incredible leader in developing leaders.
That's cool.
And did the same thing with me. He just asked me about 3 or 4 weeks into my sophomore year. He said, "Lance, hey, there's a small church about 45 minutes away, looking for a youth director just to come over there on Sundays." He said, "I think you ought to talk to this pastor. Why don't I give him your number and he can give you a call?" And I looked at him and said, "No." And all, but he kept after me for about 3 or 4 weeks and kept asking, and I finally said, "Okay."
41 years later, here you are.
41 years later. Unfortunately, closer to that than not.
Yeah, right. Okay.
For sure. But incredible. That. So I kind of think of it. You hear about that connection. You just mentioned all those people. I could go through about a list of 10 to 20 folks the same way that are connected in different places across the globe and leading them in ministry ways or leadership ways within their companies and things as well. And it's just the friendships and the bonds that were there made through that ministry, the extra connect because we were followers of Christ. Has just bonded us as a brother and sisterhood. You hear sororities and fraternities talk about brotherhoods and sisterhoods, but there's Christianity. It's got the market on that.
Absolutely,
for
we
sure.
own it.
Yeah,
man.
No.
Well, so I was out of town at the end of last week, and I was at the lake, had a really good time there. In my absence, you and Josh sat down with Lynn for this interview. I've watched it at this point, and I think you guys are going to really be blessed by this interview with Lynn Lloyd.
Hope you enjoy it. So let's start this way. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your family, Who you married to? Your kids, your grandkids?
My wife is Rebecca Lloyd, and we have 5 children and 13 grandchildren.
Wow.
And just within the last couple of years, all of those couples, with the exception of one couple, has moved back. Matt and Jackie still live in Hammond, Louisiana, where he's a BCM director, campus minister there. And but the other 4 are up here and either work with Walmart or J.D. Hunt. So right now we love Walmart or J.D. Hunt.
All right. I'm going to throw Josh a curveball. Josh, I got you on camera right now. So you've got a relationship with Lynn for a little bit. Tell me a little bit about what Lynn does. I didn't really introduce why we got him on here.
Yeah, so, when I first met Lynn, Lynn was the BCM director at the University of Arkansas. So he directed the Baptist Collegiate Ministry. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s going to that ministry, it was probably called Baptist Student Union. So if you grew up going to BSU or Baptist Collegiate Ministry, BCM, that you might have been connected with one of those ministries, and Lynn was part of that ministry. What year did you start at the BSU? It was BSU then. What year did you start at BSU?
At the University of Arkansas started in 1984.
Yeah.
But originally started in 1980 at Southern Arkansas University. That was my first campus, and I was hired in September of 1980 to go to Southern Arkansas University, and then they moved us in 1984 to come up and work with Jamie Jones. And Jamie laid an incredible foundation for me to be successful.
And so what does a BCM or a BSU director do? Because when working with college students, I feel like so often people have no idea what we're doing during the week.
Yeah.
What is that job?
Oh, man. It's the greatest job in the world.
For sure.
And almost every day is different. But every day is an opportunity to connect with college students, to share the gospel, to walk with them through life decisions. Who am I? What am I going to be? How is my character going to develop? Who am I going to marry? You have the opportunity to walk through some of the biggest life questions and decisions that they're ever going to make. And then, when you're around as long as I am, then you get to be in on who they meet, who they marry, to see their children, and unfortunately at my age, to see their children come back to school. And so, but in the process of all that, Baptist Collegiate Ministry, first and foremost, is to help students connect with church, to connect with the local body where they're going to grow. Because after they get out of college, we want them to go connect with the church someplace. So that is one of our goals, is to help them connect with the church. Helping students learn how to share the gospel, lead other students to Christ, help disciple them, and help them become disciple makers, so that they're in a lifelong learning discipleship process wherever they go. Also to learn how to use, for me, one of the things we had at the University of Arkansas was the opportunity, because we had some houses, was to teach them how to use that house, their apartment, as a platform for ministry. They're always going to have a home. They're always going to have an apartment. So why not learn how to use your home for a platform for ministry? And so to share the gospel and to live life with people. So that's a part of it. Taking on some of the most fantastic mission opportunities all over the world. My soul, I would never dream that I would have gotten to travel all over the world like I have with college students, sleep on the floor in so many inner city settings where nobody else would ever want to go. But just the opportunities to do those kind of services, ministry, serving people around the globe. It's been an incredible opportunity.
It sounds incredible. If I could start over, I'd go back to collegiate ministry. After you've sold me, sucker. Okay. You sold me on it for sure. So you did collegiate ministry on the very kind of frontline level, BCM, most of those years at the U of A. But then you made a transition.
Yes.
You transitioned from that, stayed with collegiate ministry,
Yes.
but with a different feel. So you went
Yes.
from hands-on on the college campus to the state level in Baptist
Yes.
world with the Arkansas Baptist State. So what was that transition like? What's it been? What
Yeah.
was been like for you? What moved you that direction, and what's it been like?
Yes. A couple of things that started to move me that direction. One was getting to a place at the University of Arkansas where we had great support. We had Josh Malden, we had Cole Pennick, and we had a really good staff that was there. But on our state level, my supervisor, a guy by the name of David James, our convention had just reorganized. And there was, David was just strapped. I don't know any other way to say that. And so as God began to work in my life, I began to see that, wow, I might have a greater impact and influence in collegiate ministry if I move to the state level these last few years. And I'm in my 7th year now, it's hard to believe, at the state level. And to have influence across our state on a lot of our campuses, not just our 4-year schools, but our 2-year schools. And so it just so happened, with Dr. Turner and Dr. Tucker, that they provided that opportunity to have a position for me to move to the state office, still stay in Northwest Arkansas, which I feel like was kind of a trick, but
Okay.
I didn't realize I was going to have to drive so much. But it has worked out incredible. I'm so thankful to be here in Northwest Arkansas, even though I travel much across the state to work with all of our campus ministries in the area of missions, program, personnel, property, whatever comes up on any of our 32 campuses, then I usually get to have a little input in that and influence in that.
So you said earlier that one of the key things about BCM ministry is connecting with the local church.
Yep.
You've been connected with our church
Yep.
you tell me. How long have you been connected here at First Baptist Church? Why First Baptist Church? And what's been that connection been like for you?
Oh, when I came to Fayetteville, it was just this awesome kind of experience coming to Fayetteville. We moved from Magnolia, Arkansas, where there was basically just one church to be connected to. And so when we came to Fayetteville, there were a number of churches to be connected to. But here at First Baptist Church, Jerry Mitchell was the pastor here. Jerry was my BSU director when I was in college. And so Jerry took me on my first mission trip as a freshman. Jerry sent me to my first little church, Love Lady Baptist Church, to lead worship at this little bitty country church. Jerry had a huge influence in drawing me into BCM, campus ministry, and even church ministry while I was in college. I served as Jerry's youth minister after I graduated from college. Jerry had left, moved to Alva, Oklahoma, and I had taken a job. My degree was in medical laboratory science. I had taken a job. I was working. I got a call from Jerry. He said, "We need you to come out here." And I had no idea where Alva, Oklahoma was. But ended up, he talked me into just driving out there, got out there, and it was one of those experiences where, God just inaudibly talks to you and says, "You need to be here." So quit that job, went to work with Jerry for 2 years. From there, I moved to seminary, so there was this gap, and in that time, Jerry moved to First Fayetteville. But even at that, what drew me to First Fayetteville, not just my relationship with Jerry, but what drew me and our family to First Baptist Church Fayetteville was a Sunday school class. It was a Sunday school class that was taught by a young lawyer here in town and his family, and we connected with people our age, and it was just a really neat, dynamic experience. The community that we developed, the friends that we developed, that sold us on the First Baptist Church of Fayetteville, and that's what has kept us at First Baptist Church of Fayetteville. Over these years, have gotten to serve in all different parts of the church in different committees, and this church has walked with me through the hardest time of my life, losing a spouse to leukemia. It's where I met my second spouse, Rebecca, here, and this church has nurtured our children and grown them all the way up through their college years, and now they're all successful, and we have a multitude of grandchildren. And so when they come home, they like to come back here and go to church. They consider First Fayetteville to be their home church. And so I added it up today. 36 years we've been members of this church. And so I can't have imagined life without being a part of this church. It is very, very deeply ingrained in our relationships, family, friendships, everything. Mm-hmm.
A few things have changed in our area since 1980.
Oh, my.
On the campus, in the city, in the church.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember when I came in 2009, one of the very first conversations I had with you, we were sitting on campus, and I said, what's changed in your time here? Like, at that point, you'd been here for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
You were about to hit 20 years that you had been on the campus. And what's changed over that time? And you shared some insight with me about how the university culture had changed a little bit, the type of student that comes to the University of Arkansas, some of those things. 11 years later, we've seen some pretty monumental change again. In your 30 years, in the 20 years on the campus, and the 10 plus years since you've left, or about the 10 years since you've left, what's been some of the major changes you've seen at the university and working with college students, what a BCM does, some of those things? How'd you speak to that?
Oh, wow. And this conversation could go on and on. But just a couple of thoughts, especially with the University of Arkansas. And by the way, Dan, when I came to U of A, I became all in as a Razorback and a Razorback fan. And, we lived right by the campus, and we lived and breathed campus life. And everything that surrounded the university. And so some of the things that really shifted, one was, and especially in the last 10 years, has been the rapid growth of the University of Arkansas, numerically jumping from 14,000 students to 25,000, 26,000 students. Seeing the rapid growth of those students that are coming, the influence of a lot of those being from out of state, majority of those, and you recognize that so many of our incoming students are from Texas, right? And the culture and influence that has brought into the Greek system, into just the way that campuses had to try and grow, and then the incredible rapid growth of these enormous apartment complexes that I think has to make us shift our thinking of how we reach students, because they're gathered by the thousands in these complexes, and they're still continuing to build some of those complexes. So it's shifted the way we need to think and look at campus ministry and the way we do campus ministry, because now it's so strategic. Within 4 miles of the University of Arkansas is where all these folks live.
Yeah.
And so our target has had to expand. Unfortunately, what also has changed, and this too, is just a more of a secular mindset. Yeah. And part of this roots back into our churches, and David Powell could probably speak to this too, is the number of strong Christian students that are coming out of our churches that are going on to, into higher education. That it just seems like every year we lose ground with our youth groups. So there's not youth choirs anymore. There's not Wednesday night youth programs that flow and make it easy. I mean, I always had such incredible leaders. Some of those came to Christ while we were there, but some we depended on those to come from churches.
Yeah.
It is harder and harder to find those freshmen coming in.
Yeah.
More of a challenge, and just the whole shift in our culture, the need for apologetics and training in apologetics so that they can defend their faith, and philosophies that are so much stronger now than ever before. Of course, LGBT movement, racial things that happen on campus. There's just whole broad dynamic of changes that face our students now. So, and just atheism in a sense is so much louder and so much more aggressive than ever before. So it's much more of a challenge for a student who's a believer to speak out, because they're going to be challenged and they're going to be they're going to be questioned, and they're not going to be listened to, and so that's a challenge in itself. So lots of big changes, and so campus ministry has to change in a way we strategically get into campus, how we strategically get into these huge residence complexes to, in a sense, start Bible studies and cell groups, and relationships are still the key. It's just that we need a lot more of our students developing relationships to answer questions, faithfully share the gospel in a much more non-accepting culture.
Yeah, so you can think over 30 years there's been there are issues you weren't dealing with 30 years ago that are an everyday issue now. But in the last 6 months, things have changed drastically.
Yes.
So it's not just like slow change over 30 years. In 6 months, we've seen monumental change in even how we approach ministry with quarantine and COVID-19 and all the uncertainty of how students are going to come back to campus, what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
Especially on a state level, as you're dealing with multiple campuses, how have you seen people do that well? What are maybe some of the expectations of what you want to see campus ministries and church-based collegiate ministries do to reach and disciple students in the midst of a COVID-19 world? What does that look like?
Man, there are so many questions right now, and in some ways, our campus ministers and campus ministries are waiting to hear more from the universities.
Right.
And so we're kind of in this delayed waiting period to see what universities or guidelines are going to be set in place. Some of those are starting to come out now, but with this potential spike of the virus that still, they say, might be coming in its way, it has totally changed what we're looking at in doing. And sometimes you have plan A, plan B, plan C, and none of those plans are going to work. But the things and as you know, for a campus minister, just like yourself, ministry right now is just hard. It is hard. It is harder to connect with students. We're connecting with even doing all these Zoom conferences. Everything's been canceled that you would depend on, that would come along beside you to help you disciple a student, like sending them off on a mission trip or a camp for the summer, or all those extracurricular things that cross-train the student. So we're going to be coming back in the fall with student leaders who are ready to lead, I think. But they haven't had as great of an experience as they possibly could have had. And so our campus ministers are working overtime to do extra Zoom calls with leadership, to develop their leadership. Leadership development, developing your student leaders is the key to your ministry. Your ministry isn't about you as much as it is about what kind of leaders you have, and their ability to be salt and light on the campus. They speak into a world that we can't. And so this leadership development has been difficult at best, but it is continuing to do so. The second big challenge is getting the names of freshmen, those that are coming in. And our campus ministers have worked, I think, harder this fall, this spring, the last 2 months in recruiting. BCM is much like a football team. There's a recruiting season, and then you kick off and you start your 16-week semester, and you've got your game plan that you're going to work out. And so this recruiting effort by our campus ministers across the state has probably been the strongest and the best that I've seen in years. Hopefully, it will produce names for our BCMs, for our churches to contact, because I'm thinking that these 2020 seniors, when they hit the campus, they've not had graduation, they've not said goodbye to their friends or their classmates hardly at all, and they're going to be coming to campus, and I think they're going to be looking for key relationships. And as we know, the first 6 weeks of your semester of freshman student semester is the most important connecting time of their college career. So what happens is those first 6 weeks by our student leaders, by our campus ministers, is going to be critical, and it's going to be strategic. And so what I'm seeing is still questions: how are we going to do this? If we can't meet in big groups, if we can't have howdy parties, if we can't have
giveaway
things on campus, if we can't give food away, and college students come for food, what changes are necessary to be made? And so right now we're in that process of saying, okay, what's it going to look like? How are you going to do this? And so I don't know that I can answer you some things specifically yet, but I do know there's going to be a lot of personal contacts, and that might be the most best thing we've ever done. It may not be the giveaways, it may not be the big events, it may be one-on-one.
So what we might see is 2020 looks a lot more like what 1980 looked like starting ministry, and just meeting people, not relying on the internet, not relying on even big events, but just people meeting people and inviting them to church. Kind of like what it looked like not only in 1980, but maybe in the early church as well, what we read about in things like the book of Acts.
Exactly.
That might be a good change for all of us.
Yep.
So. Well, Len, thank you so much. Your perspective means so much. What you bring in your experience at the University of Arkansas, your history with this church, this has been a treat for me to just listen to your stories, and it has been for a long time, for these 11 years that we've got to partner together in ministry, and how you've invested in my family. This has been a treat for me. I know it's been a treat for our church family. So thank you for sharing with us during this time.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Appreciate your friendship. Josh, thank you for stepping in and doing this interview with me, as David has been off on vacation this week as well. So, Lynn, really appreciate you guys. All right, well, wow, I hope you caught the warmth and the depth that Lynn Lloyd is when it comes to collegiate ministry, his desire for that. You know, one of the things that kind of really jumped out at me, and we, as you listen to the playback as well, I know one of the things we've already talked about is just some of the challenges that are feeling unique to collegiate ministry these days. He talked about the challenge of needing to be more in tune with knowing God's word and sharing it, defending it. He called it apologetics as well. So as our student minister here, that you're feeding students out of our church into the college world that will be on campuses, much like the U of A or in that realm. And all. That idea of needing to be able to defend your faith more, understand the truth of God's word more in order to explain it. So what are your thoughts on some of that, what Len said?
So students face a culture that is a little bit more adverse to who we are and what we believe than they have at any point. I mean, I just know that some of the difficulty in approaching apologetics now comes from the fact that we live in the days of the internet, where it might have been at one time X youth ministry is able to, supply like prepackaged answer of, how do you deal with, dinosaurs in the fossil record, or how do you deal with, people talking about contradictions in the Bible or something like that, and where maybe students didn't actually have a lot of access to information. They didn't have a lot of information at their fingertips. Yeah. And now they do. Okay. And so you get into conversations with students and you talk through some of these things, or you read through or whatever. But then what can still happen is, so you provide like apologetic reasoning and answers, but then let's say a student might take that information and now go back to Google with the fresh information. And okay, here's the fresh counter argument to like whatever pat apologetic answer you've provided. So that like I find apologetics to be more of like an ongoing conversation with students and how we approach these things than just like answer this one time, or here's a book that answers these questions and like it's a done deal. Very, very important thing. I think that actually apologetics and evangelism go hand in hand now. Maybe in a way more than they ever had before, where maybe in the past when Christianity was sort of a part of the cultural fabric, and everyone generally understood what we meant when we were talking about Jesus and the gospel and grace and forgiveness and getting saved. Now we've got to explain the terms. We've got to do more explanation, and then with the explanation, we've got to provide reason for these things. And so, man, it's so important. I would say apologetics takes on like a new level of importance than we've ever seen before.
And just hearing you kind of walk through that explanation is not an easy explanation necessarily.
Nothing is easy anymore.
It's not easy. That's one of the things that Lynn even shared. It's hard. The ministry is harder now. And I know he was referring to some of the things with COVID and all that, but even prior to that, you heard some of the challenges of the differences now of preparing students to defend their faith, having students that are already prepared, hopefully as 16, 17, 18-year-olds, they're coming out of youth ministries, but we know the challenges there. They're still in some developmental ages within their minds, so trying to help them grasp some of those great apologetic concepts in a sense, and going into that. But one of the things I heard Lynn say, he used the word relationship several times, but he used it that one time in context as, it's about relationships. And even hearing you describe apologetics and kind of talking through it, and then they go to Google, and then you got to talk about it again. Well, that's a challenge, but it's also, that's relational, isn't it? And so it just made me think that in that old thought of just spend time with people. We were charged to go out and be amongst folks, be friendly with them, have a relationship with them, and then have a good ability to share the gospel. Maybe know the Romans road real well, or have the ABC questions real quickly on things, and then you could do that. But now it's more have the relationships. That's bottom line. It's got to be there, but you got to be apologetically prepared.
Absolutely. And it was an interesting thing. I thought that I think Josh actually, as one of his takeaways from the conversation with Lynn, at the very end, he kind of snuck it in saying that, so college ministry and recruitment in college ministry is closer to like 1980 now than maybe it was 5 or 10 years ago, in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic that we're dealing with, where contact is severed, and like we need to reach out and make these connections and these contacts really early in people's careers, and yet we're supposed to stay away from people. Man, that's an added difficulty that's they're facing in this time.
And to that, somewhere along the line, Lynn Lloyd, he made the statement. I made sure I wrote it down. He said, "What changes are necessary to make?" In that context of, it's different to try to reach out and recruit, but acknowledging some changes have to be made. We kind of had that conversation here in the life of church. What does it mean to go back to, what's the new normal? What changes are going to have to be made? And we're still trying to walk through what that looks like. And well, how can we kind of put a button on this for today?
Well, I mean, just a few things about Lynn and about BCM work. Let me just say this. Lynn has been very consistent in his goals through the years, and as far as the ends he's attempting to reach. Outreach to international students has always been a hallmark of the BCM here. I remember going out and visiting Jamie Jones' widow, Beverly, just a year ago, let's say, and having some of that conversation with her. She still lives here in Fayetteville. So Jamie was the long time, maybe like 30 years BCM director before Lynn. And Lynn came in actually as the associate to Jamie there. So we had like a 70-year run that was two guys doing, which is awesome, doing college ministry, campus ministry up here at the BCM. They've been reaching out to international students for a long time. And I feel like this is something that makes BCM work distinctive even among the other campus ministries. Because Jamie, from a long time ago, was on board with knowing we can reach the nations from what was this little town of Fayetteville here. When you'll have students come in from Jordan and from Thailand and from Eastern Europe and wherever else, South America, if you can reach them and get into gospel conversations with them and someone step in and have a week in, week out, as Lynn would say, life-on-life discipleship relationship with them, then who even knows what benefits might be reaped on the other side of the globe someday. That has always been a hallmark for Lynn. You could hear Lynn talk about the importance of developing leaders, and he was talking about maybe not as many ready-to-go students coming into college ready to be leaders in campus ministry. And so they've got this increased impetus to get in there and train students in the faith and train students to reach other students and to be an influence and have an impact out there on the campus in the midst of an increasingly difficult time to do so. And so, man, that's a really, really good thing. And I love these guys. I grew up in BCM world. You have similar story. I know Josh has the same story. We all, I think, even met and went through our college careers with our wives, like in BSU and BSM and BCM contexts. And you know, we're marked by that. I wanted to say one other thing about the relationship of campus ministries and like church-based college ministries. So we do both. And actually the BCM that's here, as I understand it, was started by our church basically as our college ministry at this church. And now we do both. And it's interesting to me to see the role that both of them play. Through the college ministry, like the one that Josh runs here at this church, you get integrated more into the life of an intergenerational church where you are around preschoolers and you're around senior adults. And whatever happens in any stage of life, like church will always be there. And you could hear that inside of Lynn's interview there, that their goal has always been to get students plugged into churches, knowing that like college is a unique time in life. But you came from a church and you're probably and you need to be going back to a church at some point. So they want to make sure that relationship isn't broken. But in the meantime, there's also something special and distinctive that happens with a campus ministry like the BCM that's located right there just across the road from the university, where you are where students already are.
The access, and proximity.
Exactly. And it's day after day after day, and it can happen at 10 a.m. No college student is up for any kind of conversation before 10 a.m. But there can be those kind of conversations taking place at 9 p.m. and at 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. And like that kind of stuff happens around the BCM too. So man, it's that's
good.
Yeah.
Well, we are thankful that Lynn took some time to visit with us. We are grateful for the BCM ministry through the years. Many of you all have testimonies about that as well. But we hope you'll continue to pray for the Baptist Collegiate Ministries here in Arkansas and across our nation, as well as there's a tall task that they have in training up others and connecting them with the life of church to make a difference for the gospel in the world. Thanks again.